This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Ornini, and these are your headlines. Save the Children highlight that child wasting is still a major issue. 2 serial rapists are apprehended after a long reign of terror. And the king of the jungle is coming back. But firstly, to our headline story. Save the Children Cambodia this week presented its report on child wasting, which studied children in 3 different provinces. Now, before we go any further, allow me to define child wasting. UNICEF quote it as, "Wasting is the most immediate and life-threatening form of malnutrition. Its results are from the failure to prevent malnutrition amongst those most vulnerable. Quite simply, it is a form of starvation." The Cambodia Demographic and Health Survey states that child wasting has improved since the year 2000, when it was at a very alarming 17%. But by 2014, it had dropped to just 10%. And according to the most recent figures, the number of emaciated children has not declined since then, and it still remains at 10%. The health survey also noted that in Kampong Chang and Koh Kong, the rates are much higher, and highlights a critical need for improved complementary feeding practices, as wasting is most prevalent amongst infants under the age of 6 months old. For instance, in Kampong Cham, women only breastfeed their infants, and that's 48% of all women polled. And if that is not enough to sustain life, it was also noted that 70% of children consume absolutely no vegetables at all, again leading to poor nutrition. Of course, the main driver of these figures is not a lack of care or a lack of interest. It is, of course, poverty. And it is those lower income families, often with large families themselves, that struggle on a daily basis. Mothers who are watching their infants waste away as they cannot afford the food they need to keep their children healthy and sometimes keep them alive. In this week's Crime Desk, 2 young men rape again, bringing fear to local women. A drug dealer is unmasked as a leading light of the community, and a murder that is most unusual. Back in the 1980s, the names of Charles Ng and Leonard Lake were not only famous, but became synonymous with pure evil. For what they did is horrified a nation. In a criminal case that shocked America, what surprised many was that 2 unrelated men had teamed up to commit their brutal crimes. They would abduct women to rape them, and then they would dispose of their bodies. Well, here in the kingdom this week, 2 men have been arrested for both being serial rapists that work together as a team to abduct young women. They picked their targets, they beat them, they robbed them, and finally, they savagely raped them. All for their own selfish gratification. The 2 men, aged 23 and 21, have now been arrested in Phnom Penh for a string of rapes. So far, they have been charged with multiple cases of aggravated rape. Now, aggravated rape, from legal terms, actually means gang rape. And there is no doubt that their crime spree would have continued if they were not stopped. The first assault was on November 2023, where they assaulted and raped a 29-year-old female. They stole her mobile phone and 50,000 real, a little over $10. Case number 2. The very next month, December, a 19-year-old female was savagely raped and robbed of her phone as well as cash and jewellery. Later, that very same month, a 21-year-old was to fall victim to the pair. Again, she was robbed of her phone and savagely raped. And then, in the following month, January of 2024, an 18-year-old girl was abducted and she was also raped. All the victims had been dragged into nearby rice fields and had been beaten as well as sexually assaulted. The crime spree would have continued if it was not for the police. But more so, the brave victims themselves that came forward to tell their humiliating stories. As so often, crimes such as this are not reported. And those brave victims made sure that these animals would be caged and face the full wrath of the law. Okay, a short story this one, but it packs quite the surprising punch. Let us first start with a picture of the suspect. And here he is. Now, this guy has been caught for not only dealing drugs, but having a network of drug dealers that he recruited. Now, there's not much unusual there. One man at the top of the pyramid who is the boss of his own little drug dealing syndicate. So that on its own is not surprising, and it hardly is newsworthy. But it does become very newsworthy when we learn that his actual day job is being a chief of police. Yes, indeed, a 42-year-old male called Yem Rania was in fact a police chief in Prey Veng. And when he was busted for drug trafficking, so was his small band of drug dealers. Instead of him stopping the flow of drugs and locking up criminals, this police chief was profiteering from the sale of lethal methamphetamine. It appears he and his gang worked out of a karaoke bar and were known dealers. But when the police got wind of their corrupt organisation, they raided that karaoke bar and took down the entire gang in one fell swoop. They have now been charged with trafficking, distribution and illegal use of drugs. And if convicted, the once mighty police chief now faces an awful long time in prison. To close our crime desk this week, a murder so unique I actually searched Google to see if I could find another murder that was executed using the same murder weapon. But it is so very bizarre, on searching the web, I could find no similar cases. So, prepare yourself to hear of a murder story you will only ever hear of once in your entire life. 3 men on a building site got rather drunk one afternoon, and through the haze of alcohol, an argument emerged. 2 men taking one side and the other solitary man taking the other. The argument raged on, and 2 of the men retreated into the home that they were building. It was then the roar of a diesel engine could be heard as a large JVC digger bore down on the very house that they were sheltering in. But of course they felt safe as they were in a solid brick house. But that feeling of security was soon to leave them when the huge metal bucket of the digger came crashing through the very roof that they were sheltering under. Both of them fell to the ground, And it wasn't long before the giant metal bucket yet again crashed into the house like some giant robot's arm, demolishing all of the walls around them. The scene was quite simply terrifying, and one man did manage to scramble through the dust and the debris to a safe place. But his friend was killed as tons of debris fell upon him. The driver was finally pulled from the digger's cab. He has now been arrested, and he will soon face a judge in a murder case that the judge would have found completely unique. Let us end this week with some good news. That oddly will start with a very tragic photo. But through the tragedy, we will see the wonderful light of hope. Look at this. This image on your screen now is the last known photo of a tiger in Cambodia. It was taken back in 2007, and since then, not one single tiger has been seen in the entire kingdom. They have all been poached and killed for their fur. They have quite simply been wiped off the face of the earth by cruel and evil men who will sell their own nation's heritage for a handful of dollars. It is truly tragic. But that tale of sorrow is soon to be reversed with the help of the Indian government, who are to repopulate Cambodia with tigers from their wildly successful tiger breeding program. And this is no pipe dream, as at current the tigers will return to the Cardamom Mountains by the end of this year. After years of anticipation, Cambodia and India have now announced the finalization of plans to reintroduce wild tigers from India into their natural habitat in the Cardamom Mountains, the largest surviving rainforest in the whole of Cambodia. Experts are now ensuring that all of the necessary prerequisites are in place, including a sufficient prey base for the tigers and suitable habitat. Now, what could be better than that? The proud and mighty tiger returning to a land it lost over a decade ago. Once again, the most majestic of beasts will stalk the jungles of Cambodia, and once again, he will be the lord of all he purveys. And he will be the king of the wildlife kingdom. It's time to have a look ahead and see what the weather has in store for us next week. Okay, so here we are at the final leaf in the book of this week's show. And wasn't that last story excellent about the jolly old tiger? Now, they've been negotiating for a long time, and I actually know the Indian ambassador, and she's a lovely lady. No, she is. She's totally charming, and they've been working hard behind the scenes, and they're going to bring the tigers back this year. That is a big move on the old wildlife front. I'm elated. And when they get here, they'll be having sunnier weather than we have now. Look at that across the board. We have rain, we have hurricane, we have lightning, we have all sorts going on. Humidity being quoted at 97%. Really? Who would have guessed that one? But the rainfall during the week will be slightly less. But as we head off into the end of the week, you can only expect more. This has been the Khmer Times News. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by following us on both Facebook and Telegram. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next weekend for your weekly Roundup.